Good evening, members and guests. We appreciate everyone being here this evening.
On level, then you're going to end up with dropouts. And when they drop out, there is nothing good that happens with those children unless you can get them back in school. And so we decided it was very, very important and imperative for us to invest a lot of time and effort into making sure children at the 4th grade level were ready to move on. And this is where the extended day learning that I described a minute ago came into play for them. All students enter 9th grade proficient in ELA and math. He also spoke very eloquently about the course credits that you earn at the high school level and the number of units you need to earn per year in order to graduate on time. And again, this is a student falls behind a grade, not necessarily at the high school level because it's more units than grades, but when they fall behind or they have to repeat a grade, you start risking, especially at the high school level, that they're going to drop out. Because at that point, the students can pretty much take care of themselves, and if they don't go to school, then it's not like their parents are going to have to stay home from work or anything like that. These are going to be 14, 15, 16-year-olds that are at home on their own, left to their own devices. And so it's better for the community, better for the child, better for all involved that the child stays in school and finds a path that makes a difference for them in their life. Again, not necessarily going to college, but we offer several courses of instruction at our career center where they can learn to be an electrician or learn to weld or work with robotics, or they can learn how to work in a restaurant. These are all courses and programs that we offer to try to make sure children stay in school, and when they leave school, they're able to be productive members of society. So then in August of 2016, the Department of Education released the LEAP scores for grades 3 through 8. I talked about graduation rates again earlier. These are our elementary and middle school scores. The students in the parish showed steady improvement in ELA, math, and science, with 43% of all students scoring at the advanced or mastery level, which puts the district in the 82nd percentile among Louisiana districts and 5 points higher than the state average. Again, Dr. Aguilar's programs and leadership are showing immediate results 15 months into his tenure. In November, the Department of Education released school and district performance scores. So we went over graduation rates, we went over individual student scores. These are all compiled into school scores and then aggregated up to the district. Lafayette Parish posted a 7.1 point gain, the 16th best in the state, moving from an 89.2 to a 96.3. That moved Lafayette Parish from 27th to 19th, so we moved into the top 20 in school districts in the state in 1 year. The 7.1 point gain marked the largest gain in district performance since the Department of Education began assigning performance scores to schools and districts in 2001. 85%, 34 of our 40 schools posted positive gains, and 62.5%, 25 of the 40 grew 2.5 points or more. In the summer of 2016, when we bid our garbage contract for the school system, which is quite a large contract. Things you learn about the school system management when you get on the school board is that not only are we the largest employer in the parish, but we also generate the most trash in the parish. And so we have a rather large garbage contract. We included in our request for proposal in our bid process for our garbage contract the desire to have a recycling program, which the school system up until that point did not recycle. And this came about because we had 2 parents who would actually put recycle containers on campus at Woodvale Elementary School, and they would actually go and collect the recyclable material and then drive around to their friends' houses and put the material in their recycle bins to be picked up by the city. And so as a result of their initiative, we decided to start a pilot program. I believe it started at 5 schools, 5 elementary schools, and just to see if we could make a dent in it. And we were so successful in those 6 months that we expanded it in December to 18 schools and 2 central office locations, and then it eventually grew a year later to where we recycled 82 tons of paper. Yeah. I know, I was a little shocked. And then come to find out, we're the only school system in the state that has a district-wide recycling program, like an official recycling program. I'm sure there are schools that do it on their own, but we're the only ones that have it as a part of our garbage contract, and really teaching children from the youngest age the importance of recycling and making sure that we do what's responsible. In June of 2017, so 6 months later, we showed 242 8th grade students completed Algebra 1. Now, I didn't take Algebra 1 until I was in 10th grade, I think. But 242 students completed Algebra 1 in 8th grade, an increase of 170 students over the prior year. Of those 242, 212 scored the highest level of excellent on the state end-of-course test. That's 87.6% of the students. 29 students scored good, and only 1 scored fair. So these are students who, we talked about the importance of entering high school proficient in ELA and math. These are 242 8th grade students who will be going to high school the following year, ready to learn math, because we are teaching them Algebra 1 in middle school. A fine addition to our offerings. Over 21,000 students in June of 2017, the prior year, participated in the school system's Million Word Readers Challenge, of which 934 students read over 1 million words. I'd like you to put that through your brain for a second. 934 students, if I'm right, that comes out to about 3% of our students read 1 million words in the 16-17 school year. Of the 21,000 students that participated, I'm going to read this number to you. 5,635,000,000 words were read by those 21,000 students. The number speaks for itself, I think. Also that summer, in the summer of 2017, the College Board announced the AP Scholars for high schools, and Lafayette Parish had a total of 93 AP Scholars. 3 scholars at Acadiana High, 1 at David Thibodeau STEM Magnet Academy, and 89 at Lafayette High School, which I think is a tribute to the faculty and staff at Lafayette High and their ability to offer the varied number of AP courses to those students, and then make sure that within the courses they are prepared to take the test. Every AP test, I'll speak from my experience 25 years ago, those tests are money out of your parents' pocket right there. Every test you pass with a 5 means that's coursework that you don't have to complete in college. So Lafayette High's ability to prepare their students for advanced coursework right at the beginning of their college careers, I think on average will save quite a few semesters of coursework for those students. In November of 2017, the district maintained its B score. We reckon, and I apologize, somebody is insisting that I look at my phone. We had Northside High School 3-year growth, so under Dr. Aguilar's leadership and the leadership of the principal at Northside, went from an F to a C in 2017. 3-year growth was 23.5 school performance score points. Northside, I believe the common wisdom around town at the time was that Northside was an F, and it had been an F for as long as anybody could remember. And now we're showing drastic improvement in the education going on at Northside High School, to the point where it's not only no longer an F, but it's a C school, and the growth hasn't stopped since then. So I'm very, very proud of the work that the faculty and staff at Northside are doing. Alice Boucher Elementary School, mentioned earlier, along with J.W. Falk and Karen Crowe Heights, is one of our traditionally underperforming schools. Also experienced exemplary growth, and that is a label from the State Department of Education. In 2015 it was a D, and in 2017 it was a C. Reflects a growth of 18 points in 2 years. A third school earned exemplary growth, Dussault Elementary School. It was a D in 2017. The school was a C that year. And I'll jump straight ahead and say that Alice Boucher and J.W. Falk last year were in the top 10 percentile of growth for all elementary schools in the state of Louisiana, not just Lafayette Parish. They were rated as an A for growth, which measures basically where the students are when the teachers get them, and where the students are when the student's in the year. And that'll show you the quality of the education going on at those 2 schools, that those students are being moved multiple grade levels in 1 year in math and English. The work at Alice Boucher and J.W. Falk is really great. In May of 2018, so we're talking a year ago now, graduation rates rose again from 75% to 76.8% for our high schools, parish-wide. Also in May of 2018, one of the programs that I'm most proud of, we approved an expansion and reorganization of our school resource officer program, and this was the effort of the school board in the wake of the Parkland shootings in Florida to make sure that every campus in our parish had at least one armed police officer on duty at all times while children are on campus. Prior to this, no elementary school in the parish had a police officer. Middle schools had one and high schools had two. With the expansion objectives, we partnered with each municipality in the parish, City of Lafayette, all of the small towns, plus the Lafayette Parish Sheriff, and we're splitting the cost of these officers with the respective law enforcement agencies, under the idea that, as we said at the time, public safety is not our job. Our job is education, but at the same time, we appreciate the fact that it is so important to us that we are willing to pay for half of it to help them accomplish their objective and make sure that our children are safe. And so that includes every officer on every campus has a squad car. And I can speak for my children's school. The squad car is parked in the front of the school so that if anybody takes a look at that campus, they know that there's trouble waiting for them inside if they decide to do anything. So we decided that the best possible course of action for us at that point in time was deterrence. And we have done everything within our power to make sure that everybody understands that our campuses are not an option if they would like to cause harm. In July of 2018, the Department of Education released our 2017 results for our elementary and middle schools. The students showed continued improvement in the number of students scoring mastery and advanced in ELA, math, and social studies. 37% of students scored at mastery or advanced levels compared to 34% of the students statewide. Overall, the growth in the parish exceeded growth in the state by 2%. Here's where I'll brag about the school my children go to that same year. Myrtle Place Elementary is tied for the largest single-year gain and improvement among Louisiana public elementary and middle schools. The largest. So the 99.9th percentile when compared to all other public schools in Louisiana with grades 3 through 8. This is one out of 1,072 public schools, Myrtle Place Elementary, tied for the largest growth. I'm going to attribute it to my children taking the test, personally.
You're crossing the line there.
Is that right? Hey, all I know is they didn't have that growth before they took the test. That's all I know. In August 2018, another very proud moment for the school system, we renamed Plantation Elementary School on College Saloon Road to Corporal Michael Middlebrook Elementary in memory of the Lafayette City Police officer who lost his life on duty just a few months before. Corporal Middlebrook, stories were told that he gave selflessly of his time to children, read to children, worked at the YMCA. And it was a very proud moment for us to be able to do that for he and his family and make sure that our children understood what our police officers give to keep them safe and to make sure they understand what an asset our police officers are to our community. In August of 2018, the Department of Education recognized Austin Elementary as one of the outstanding schools in the Acadiana region. The school was honored for having over 65% of the students improve their test scores from 2017 to 2018, a rate substantially above the state average. In September of 2018, the Lafayette Parish School System experienced its third consecutive year of increased enrollment. As of September 5th, 2018, our enrollment was 30,274 students, not including our pre-K students. This was 339 additional students over the prior year. If you include our pre-K students, which I believe numbers around 1,500, we are closing in on 32,000 students total, which I believe when I took office was 30,200, 300, 400, something like that, in the low 30,000s. In September of 2018, the Lafayette Parish School System launched LafayetteCheckbook.com, becoming the first local government entity in Louisiana to provide total financial transparency to the public. This was a response to the feedback we received in our failed tax proposition in April of 2017, where one of the criticisms we had was that we were not transparent enough for the public to trust with their money. Fair enough. And so what we did was we instituted a website that is updated every morning to show you yesterday's financial transactions for the school system. So every morning you can go to LafayetteCheckbook.com and you can see the checks. You can't see the checks, but you can see an item for the amount of any check or any expenditure that we made yesterday, which budget cost center that check is associated with, and the overall budget of the school system. You can find any piece of financial information you want to know about your public school system on this website. To my knowledge, no one else in the state provides you with that level of transparency updated on that frequently. So I think there's always a little bit of a lag whenever you see some other governmental entity producing something like that. And then finally, Dr. Aguilar announced his retirement in January. When he was hired in May of 2015. Just a little backstory on how we arrived to a superintendent who doesn't have a contract that spans the length of the term of the school board. This school board only, one time, has a 5-year term. And this is a result of the legislation that was passed in the summer of 2014 to align the school board terms with the terms of your state representatives, the governor, the statewide officials, your mayor, your city parish council, those elected officials. So the choice was in 2014, either you could elect a school board to have a 1-year term and then have school board elections in 2015, or you could elect a school board to have a 5-year term and have elections in 2019. They chose a 5-year term. Alternatively, state law prevents a school board from awarding a contract longer than 4 years to any superintendent. Normally this is not a problem because school boards have 4-year terms, but this particular school board was a little bit of an outlier in that regard. So we were unable to give Dr. Aguilar a contract that went the length of our term, and so we offered him a 4-year contract in May of 2015, and here we are approaching May of 2019, and Dr. Aguilar, after 43 and a half years, he said, in public education. He started as I said, a biology teacher at Acadiana High School before I was born. Has decided to go enjoy his well-earned retirement. So today, we opened the post office box established to when we solicited resumes and letters of interest for our interim superintendent position, and there were 9 letters in there. I'll read you the names right now. We're waiting for our HR department to prepare redacted packets of information for the media so that they can give you more information about these people. But right now, here are the names that we retrieved from the post office box this morning. They are Brian Dingelli from Lucas, Texas, Larry DeShera from Auburn, Alabama, Dee Fowler from Madison, Alabama, Isaac Carrier from Spring, Texas, and then here's where we get into the Louisiana people. Irma Trosclair, the current Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction for the Lafayette Parish School System. Jerome Pugh, the current Superintendent of Vermilion Parish. Bart Thibodeau, the current Special Education Director for the Lafayette Parish School System. Kamacia Smith-Ross from Baton Rouge, I believe. She's an educational consultant at Southern. And then C. Michael Robinson Jr. from Thibodaux, Louisiana, who works as a consultant in some capacity for the Lafourche Parish School System. Those are the 9 names that we received today, and we will be having an interview session with these candidates or some subset of these candidates in the very near future, and then selecting, as the board has expressed its intent, an interim superintendent for a period of 1 year until June 30th, 2020, at which point the school board that you elect in the fall will select a permanent superintendent, and they will not run into the problem of giving a contract that lasts the span of their term. So a couple of things that I failed to mention in that list was the wing projects that we're undertaking at the elementary schools. After the tax proposition failed, the school board went back and made several cuts to the budget to free up recurring revenue to finance some of the projects that were on the tax proposition list, namely the wing additions at the elementary schools, the 5 elementary schools that were on the list. I'm happy to say that those have been bid out and awarded, and we should see construction on those 5 campuses through the fall. I don't think they'll be open until the 2020 school year at the earliest, but we should see progress on those things there. I think you'll find that between the project at Southside, the wing addition at Milton a few years ago, the wing addition on the 5 elementary schools plus the new elementary school in Broussard that will be opening in August, we're going to remove somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 portable buildings from our campuses. I think there were a total of 280 whenever we took office. So we're going to remove more than half. We still have a fair amount. There's still work to do on that front. But you can see it at Lafayette High right down the street. They have their tennis court back. We have to do some work on it, but there were portable buildings sitting on the tennis court for many, many years. So we can fix it back up and maybe Lafayette High can have a tennis team again. But we've done a lot of good work in producing permanent classrooms for our students and teachers so that they can get the education that they deserve. And I think we're all very proud of that. So with that said, I will take any questions you have.
Well, at least we got one question coming up.
No, you know me, I'm gonna have more
You
than
don't want to
one.
answer the question?
No, that's fine, that's fine.
Exactly. Anyhow, anyone that would want to ask a question, I'd like for y'all to come up so we can feed it through this mic. And our secretary wants a question, so go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, these new wing additions that are being built are they being built to accommodate more than the expected amount of students that are going to attend these schools? And if so, how much more?
Now they're being built to the current capacity. We're replacing one portable classroom with one permanent classroom with the expectation that we'll manage any growth through rezoning. The schools where they're being built, the elementary schools, they are not typically in the areas that have large anticipated growth of school-age children. So you're talking about Woodvale, you're talking about Edgar Martin, you're talking about LG Alamo, you're talking about Ridge Elementary School, those places right there. Southern end of the parish, we build for growth.
Okay, well, I'm a little disappointed about that because the new high school that's built in Youngsville, when y'all built it, wasn't built enough to accommodate the extra students that they received at that school. Now there's Butler buildings on a new campus, and you know, I'm kind of disappointed about that. But anyway, what's in the plan to add on to that school to help take care of that problem so we can get rid of those Butler buildings?
So the interesting thing about Southside, and I mentioned earlier when we took office, we saw that there were 2,400 middle school students in the Como High School zone. And so Como High School, if you take all the portable buildings off the campus, which we did, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, we did, okay. I believe Como High School's capacity is 1,200, and Southside High's capacity, built as it is right now, is 1,400. Now, we built Southside to eventually accommodate 2,000 students, and what I mean by that is core facilities. So there are enough bathrooms for 2,000 students. The hallways are wide enough for 2,000 students. The cafeteria is big enough for 2,000 students. But we built it with classroom space to hold 1,400 students. And there is a phase 2 of Southside, which I believe has a price tag of $18 million, to add another wing to accommodate another 600 students. What we did not anticipate is the number of students that we were going to pull out of the private schools at Southside. And the last number I saw was there were over 150 students at Southside High that had never been enrolled in the public school system before they showed up at Southside. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions. I'm pretty confident that we're pulling those from public school. These are students that probably would have gone to STM or Westminster or ESA or Ascension or something like that. And so that was what we didn't anticipate. And so when it came time to look at how we could rezone, because that was another option besides putting portable buildings at Southside, was rezoning back to Como. And what we found was we have more than 2,600 high school students between the two schools. So no matter what you do, you don't have enough classrooms between the two schools. So now your decision is, where do you want to put portable buildings? Because portable buildings are going to be put somewhere. And what, at least my logic was, I'm going to put portable buildings on the campus that has enough bathrooms to accommodate additional students. So Como can hold 1,200 students, has enough bathrooms for 1,200 students, has hallways sized for 1,200 students. Southside, they're portable buildings, but they're real bathrooms. They're real hallways, and it's a real cafeteria. So there is a phase 2, but unfortunately we do have schools that need a lot more TLC at this point in time than Southside High School.
Okay, my last question.
How many underperforming schools do we have in the Lafayette Parish school system? And of these underperforming schools, how many of them have the Leader in Me program? Thank you.
What's your definition of underperforming? I'll repeat it so everybody can hear.
Like Alice Boucher, those kids that are, like, they have the achievement gap.
Okay, so nearly every school has an achievement gap.
Okay, well, I'm talking about the schools that.
We have one F school.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one F school. We had 4, I think, when I took office. The one F school was Lafayette Middle School. Every other F school that we had whenever I took office has increased either to
Okay,
a
well,
D.
of those schools, do they have the Leader in Me program? Those schools that have gone
It's
from an
my
F or a D to a
understanding
C?
that every elementary and middle school has the Leader in Me, or is implementing it currently.
That's good.
That's my understanding. At the very, and I know this for a fact, at the very least, they have the money allocated to them for whenever the principal and the staff is ready to implement the program.
Hello, Justin.
Hello, Ray.
I've known Justin for some time. He's been very helpful in some of our situations. I'm a little unstable. I'm just getting over something very dreadful. If any of you have ever had a shingles, then you know how it is. But thank God, I'm in supposedly the last day of it. But here I am. Justin, you did a great job, and we really do appreciate your efforts and appreciate you coming down here
Thank you.
and sharing this information with us. Just for the records, my comments tonight are in no way intended to, shall we say, differ from what you say. I'm certainly not trying to be offensive in your remarks. It's my intention to, shall we say, only ask and inform questions that several happenings in the area lately have prompted me to get involved with. One of them was the ad in the paper yesterday that you became aware of today. It says that you're going to talk tonight about where it is today and what the future holds. I hope that there's a little bit more room in the schedule for the schools. I don't know how many of you saw this in the Advertiser, not the Advertiser, but the Daily Advocate on the 10th of March. Louisiana ranks dead last in citizenship know-how, thanks to the efforts of Senator Cortez and this gentleman over here. We are now conducting in all of the civics classes the same 100-point quiz that immigrants have to pass in order to become citizens. It is now a state law, so thank you for your efforts along that line. I had to make about 5 trips to Baton Rouge, but we did it. What I'm going to talk about tonight started with some of these situations. This cap, for example, started me thinking on something that was very important. About 2 years ago, I was at the Acadiana Mall in a food court, sitting at the table. Next to me were 3 high school students getting ready to graduate, won't mention the school. But one of them turned to me and he says, "Hey, I see you're a veteran." I always give a little jest when I say that. Yeah, I was in the Air Force and I flew with the Wright brothers in the Civil War, just to see what kind of response I would get. The only response that I got was, "Cool." I said, "Young man, do you have any idea when the Civil War was?" "No." "You ever hear of the Wright brothers?" "No." But what really took the cake, one of them said, "You've got Korea on your cap. Were you in the Korean Army?" I cannot believe that high school students getting ready to graduate with that, showing that lack of knowledge in basic historical facts. So that's where I come in tonight. I want to share, with permission from Mr. Carroll, a 5-minute history lesson, if I may, because it is very important and it's becoming more important each day. a 232-year history of why true history no longer is taught in most of the public schools. For example, when Thomas Jefferson saw that there was no negotiating with Muslims, he formed what is now the Marine Corps. And I've talked to several Marines and asked them, do you know when your Marine Corps was officially formed? No. They didn't tell me that in high school. These Marines were attached to U.S. merchant vessels. When the Muslims attacked U.S. merchant vessels, they were repulsed by armed soldiers, but there's more. The Marines followed the Muslims back to their villages and killed every man, woman, and child in the village under the direction of Thomas Jefferson. How many of you ever heard about that in history? It didn't take long for the Muslims to leave U.S. merchant vessels alone, though. English and French merchant vessels started running up our flag when entering the Mediterranean to secure safe travel. This is why the Marine hymn contains the verse, "To the shores of Tripoli," which is in Africa. This is very interesting and a must piece of our history. It points out where we may be heading, and this is exactly one of the reasons why I'm pointing this out. Most Americans are unaware of the fact that over 200 years ago, the United States had declared war on Islam, and Thomas Jefferson led the charge. At the height of the 18th century, Muslim pirates, the Barbary pirates were known, were the terror of the Mediterranean and a large area of the entire North Atlantic. They attacked every ship in sight and held the crews for exorbitant ransoms. Those taken hostages were subjected to barbaric treatment and wrote back heartbreaking letters begging the United States government and their families to pay whatever their Muslim captors demanded. These extortionists of the high seas represented the North African Islamic nations of Tripoli, Tunis, Morocco, and Algiers, collectively referred to as the Barbary Coast, and presented a dangerous and unprovoked threat to the new American Republic. Before the Revolutionary War, U.S. merchant ships had been under the protection of Great Britain. But when the U.S. declared its independence and entered the war, the ships of the United States were protected by France. However, once the war was won, America had to protect its own fleets. Thus, the birth of the United States Navy. And I've talked to a couple of sailors, people who used to be in the Navy. Do you know when the Navy was founded and why? No, they didn't learn that in high school. Beginning in 1784, 17 years before becoming president, Thomas Jefferson became America's minister to France. That same year, the U.S. Congress sought to appease the Muslim adversaries by following in the footprints of European nations who paid bribes to the Barbary states rather than engaging them in war. In July of 1785, Algiers pirates captured American ships, and the Dyer of Algiers, that's the commander, demanded an unheard of ransom of $60,000. It was a plain and simple case of extortion, and Thomas Jefferson was vehemently opposed to any further payments. Instead, he proposed to Congress the formation of a coalition of allied nations who together could force the Islamic states into peace. A totally disinterested United States Congress decided to pay the ransom. Again in 1786, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams met with Tripoli's ambassador to Great Britain to ask by what right his nation attacked American ships and enslaved American citizens, and why the Muslims held so many hostilities toward Americans, a nation in which they had no previous contacts at all. The two future presidents reported that the ambassador had answered that Islam was founded on the laws of their prophet, and that it was their writing in the Koran that all nations who would not acknowledge their authority were sinners, and that it was their right and their duty to make war upon them whenever they could be found and make slaves of them, and all that could be taken as prisoners, and that every Muslim should be slain in battle, was sure to go to paradise and get 76 virgins. Despite this stunning admission of premeditated violence on non-Muslim nations, as well as the objections of many notable American leaders, including George Washington, had warned that caving in was both wrong and would only further encourage the enemy. For the following 15 years, the American government paid the Muslims millions of dollars for safe passage of American ships or the return of American hostages. 2 payments of ransom and tribute amounted to over 20% of the entire United States government annual revenues in 1800. Jefferson was disgusted shortly after being sworn in as the 3rd President of the United States in 1801. The Pasha of Tripoli sent a note demanding the immediate payment of $225,000 plus $25,000 a year for every year forthcoming, and brother, that changed everything. Jefferson let the Pasha know, he let him know in no uncertain terms what he could do with his demand. The Pasha responded by cutting down the flagpole of the American consulate and declared war on the United States. Tunis, Morocco, and Algiers immediately followed suit. Jefferson, until now, had been against America raising a naval force for anything except beyond coastal defense. But having watched his nation be cowed by Islamic thuggers for long enough, decided that it was finally time to meet force with force. He dispatched a squadron of frigates to the Mediterranean and taught the Muslim nations of the Barbary Coast a lesson that he hoped that they would never forget. Congress authorized Jefferson to empower U.S. ships to seize all vessels and goods at the Pasha of Tripoli and to cause to be done all other acts of precaution or hostility as a state of war would justify. When Algiers and Tunis, who were both accustomed to American cowardice and acquiescence, saw the newly independent United States had both the will and the might to strike back, they quickly abandoned their allegiance to Tripoli. The war with Tripoli lasted 4 more years and raged up to 1815. The bravery of the United States Marine Corps was finally founded in these wars, which led to the shores of Tripoli in the Marine Hymn, and they would forever be known as leathernecks, for the leather collars in their uniforms designed to prevent their heads from being cut off by Muslim swords when boarding enemy ships. Islam and what its barbaric followers justified in doing in the name of their prophet, I'm just about through, and their God disturbed Jefferson quite deeply. America had a tradition of religious tolerance. In fact, Jefferson himself had co-authored the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, but fundamentalist Islam was like no other religion that he'd ever seen. A religion based on supremacy, whose holy book not only condoned but mandated violence against unbelievers, was unacceptable to him. Hello, his greatest fear was that someday, this brand of Islam would return and pose an even greater threat to the United States. Does that ring a bell today? This should concern every American, that Muslims have brought about women-only and swimming times in America at taxpayer-funded universities and public pools, that Christians, Jews, and Hindus have been banned from serving on juries where Muslim defendants are being judged. Piggy banks and Porky Pig tissues dispensers have been banned from workplaces because they offend Islamic sensibilities. Ice cream has been discontinued at certain Burger King locations nationwide because the picture on the wrapper looks similar to the Arabic script for Allah, and public schools are pulling pork, some of them, from their menus, and on and on and on and on to appease the Muslims. It's death by 1,000 cuts, or inch by inch, as some refer to it, and most Americans have no idea that this battle is being waged every day currently across America. by not fighting back, by allowing groups to, shall we say, ignore what is really happening and not resisting the Islamics adapting to our culture. The United States is cutting its own throat with a politically correct knife and helping to further the Islamics agency. Sadly, it appears that today America's leaders would rather be politically correct than victorious. This also speaks well for all Christian countries. If we do not remember the past, we're doomed to repeat it. Do we need another Thomas Jefferson? I suppose all of you are well aware of the fact that we currently today have 3 Muslims in the United States Congress in Washington, D.C. That's just a start, my friends. So, Justin, if I may, I have 3 questions.
All right.
Number 1, do you have any comment regarding my remarks or my findings?
No.
Okay. 2, do you feel that our public schools are, shall we say, overlooking and ignoring very important historical facts because of, shall we say, orders from higher up or political correctness, or as time element doesn't allow? Are we, and I'll ask one more and you can do them both at the same time. In civics class or history class, do they include current events without considering politics at all? And I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Absolutely.
I'm hurrying.
No, take your time. I'm gonna write down so I know. Remember what the questions were.
As they say, Houston, we have a problem. Get out of your way. Okay, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ray. The answer to both of them is going to be very similar in that I'm not going to be able to speak intelligently about the exact curriculum for high school history courses. I know pretty well what civics entails, and it entails mainly what's covered by the quiz that you spoke about. I do know, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, we cover current events.
Yes.
Okay, we cover current events. Do we have standards from the state level
Yes.
that express students should be able to, know this and know that?
United States, the standards cover 1877 to the present time.
That's what our high school history standards cover. I will say personally, Ray, I knew that exact story about the Barbary Pirates. I did. It was the first war that the United States fought as the United States under the Constitution, not the Revolutionary War, but the first war. And I knew that about the pirates boarding ships and taking sailors hostage. I did not learn about that in high school, though. I can tell you that. And I think a part of it is that we probably just don't have enough time
That's what I was wondering.
in the day. That would be my guess. I don't know that for sure. That would be my guess. I can assure you that we don't leave events out on purpose, and we certainly don't cover events with any kind of political perspective. History is history. Draw your own conclusions.
Well, I was concerned mainly with very important historical facts.
And what do you have an idea of, or anything that might be left out that's a very important historical fact?
Well, I've talked to a number of people about what I talked about. They never heard of some of this stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is not a very, it's very important, but I don't think it's very widely covered. I mean,
That's my
in
point.
between the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, everybody knows the War of 1812, right? But, you don't hear about the war against the Barbary Pirates. You don't hear too much about the Spanish-American War, because the Civil War followed pretty closely thereafter. You certainly don't hear too much about the Mexican-American War.
You don't hear anything about the Korean War.
You don't hear, well, that wasn't the war, right? War wasn't declared yet.
Exactly, right?
So, I think to some extent its importance is in the eye of the beholder. I know we cover World War I, World War II, we cover those high points that Brian talked about after 1877, certainly we're covering Reconstruction. So, You know, if you do have, I would suggest calling your BESI member if you do find that there is some part of the high school history standards that don't cover something that you find important. Maybe it was an oversight, but we're gonna follow what the state tells us the student needs to know to graduate from high school. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Got my pen ready to write them down right there.
Well, thank you for coming tonight. I was richly blessed as a child. My grandmother put me in her lap and I learned to read the Bible. And when I got too big to sit in her lap, she pulled up a chair right there and we kept reading. And by the second grade, I was reading at a sixth grade level. There was a story that a school educator called 4 seniors in his office. And he set out some current magazines on the table: Discover, Sports Illustrated, Smithsonian, National Geographic. He told them, pick up any one you want, turn to anywhere you want there, and read 3 chapters. He couldn't do it. They didn't know the words, they didn't know the thoughts behind it, didn't know it. You mentioned the War of 1812. We could go to any high school in this parish, pull out 10 people and ask them, tell us about the War of 1812, and then start pulling out their phones and looking for information on it. No, they don't have any history of America. Anyway, that involves what you mentioned, the reading programs. Congratulations on Lafayette High School and the ASL program. That's fantastic. Do we still have a teacher shortage?
Yes.
What's being done about it? No, I'm not through yet.
Okay, teachers.
Keep writing. How many foreign students do we have? They cost a whole lot of money extra. Extra teachers, extra classrooms, just to get them where we can bring them up to an English level. And how much per student is that costing us extra? This selection for the new superintendent. I do hope you all have a date to end selection. You said sometime in 2020. I really hope that's a hardline number and you'll actually make a decision by then. And my last comment was going to be about the portable buildings, but you covered that and say y'all are in the process of doing it. But wasn't it just 2 years ago that you were going big time out to the public saying, oh, we got to have money. You sent us a lot of money, raise taxes, we got to change these buildings out, we got to improve things. And all of a sudden, after the election was over, y'all started changing the portable buildings out. You found the money somewhere. Don't play games with us, please. Thank you.
Was that a question there, Ken?
That was a comment.
That was a comment? Okay, all right. We'll respond to your comment then. Yeah, there's a teacher shortage. The problem is that we are not educating enough teachers.
But we're not paying them enough to get them here.
Well, that's certainly the case. I mean, I feel like we would probably be turning out more teachers at the college level if the salary that they could expect when they got out of college was commensurate with the effort that they have to put in to graduate. And it's much the same as when I went to college. I, not unsurprisingly, chose a major in a field of study that would lead to a higher income. That was certainly part of my decision. I mean, you know, I probably didn't have the talent to be an English major, but or a writer or something like that. But my talents were fortunately in a field that are a little higher compensated. Maybe not doctor or lawyer level, but you know, it's higher than a teacher, and that's unfortunate.
Higher.
I'm sorry.
Lawyer level isn't higher.
Well, they make more than I do. I promise you that.
They do.
They may not be smarter, but they make more. So what's being done, we are, the school board in this year's budget is giving each of our teachers a $500 raise. The state, I believe, I'm pretty confident they're going to approve the governor's proposal to give each public school teacher a $1,000 raise. So in Lafayette Parish at least, every teacher can expect a $1,500 raise over what they made in the last school year. It's probably not going to be enough to impact the number of graduating education students at the University of Louisiana, but it may be enough to attract teachers from out of parish. It may be enough to peel off a few from Vermilion, a few from St. Martin, a few from Acadia, to where we can make sure that we have qualified and certified teachers in our classrooms. So to answer your question, yes, there's a teacher shortage. There's always going to be a teacher shortage because people keep having children and we are not educating as many teachers as we used to. So foreign students, I don't know the answer. I believe 2 years ago it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 6%, 7%, something like that. I don't think it costs very much extra because you're still talking about the same number of students in a classroom. They're just receiving a little bit different instruction. Okay, so it's not like you have foreign students in a regular classroom where you have your teacher that's going to teach the elementary school students English and math and social studies. They're together with a teacher that is teaching them English as a second language. So it's not too much extra where we're not putting an extra teacher in the classroom. The students are getting instructed in the ESL.
So that's 6% of 30,000 students.
Yeah, something like that. I believe that's what the answer was 2 years ago. If I'm wrong, I hope you don't hold it against me. I'm not going to be too far off though. That's a reasonable ballpark. The superintendent search, just to be clear, the names I read there was a selection, the choices we have for an interim superintendent. The idea being that this school board didn't want to hire a permanent superintendent since 9 months from now, you don't know who the school board's going to be, right? Because we're having school board elections this fall. We thought that the applications you might receive for the permanent superintendent's job might not be as high quality as they would be a year from now because you'd be asking somebody, presumably the person you'd hire is successful in their current job. You certainly don't want to hire people that are not successful in their current job. So you'd be asking somebody to leave a job where they're successful to come here for an undetermined period of time to work for they don't know who, right? They don't know who their bosses are going to be until this fall. They don't know how long they could be the superintendent because remember I told you we can't give a contract that's 4 years. We also can't give a contract that extends more than 2 years past the end of our term. And so we would be limited to a 30-month contract if we tried to hire somebody permanently right now. So you'd be asking somebody to leave a good job for a 2.5-year contract to work for they don't know who. So we chose to go the interim route, have somebody for a year and let the next school board choose the permanent superintendent in the first half of 2020. They'll start the process.
How much will that cost?
To do the search,
Do the interim?
it'll cost, I don't know, $160,000 for somebody to work for a year.
I mean, search. to get-
Oh, the search, no, it doesn't cost us anything. We didn't advertise in any newspapers. We put a post on our website that said, send us your resume. And so it's costing us nothing but time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. As far as the portable buildings, I'll tell you exactly how we did it. I wasn't playing games. I very clearly came right here and I told you that if the tax doesn't pass, then we are going to cut our budget and get this done. It's very important to us. We thought it was imperative. Now the option was, do you like the services you're getting now? If you do, then let's vote for the tax because we're going to cut. And so one of the ways we did it, we cut $1 million out of transportation. We reduced the number of stops. We made children walk a little farther from their house to the bus stop. Sometimes parents need to drive them to these satellite locations when they go to school out of zone. We saved $1 million that way. That was part of it. Another part of it was increased state funding from the increased enrollment at Southside High School. That's another part of it. I told you that school system enrollment has increased every year. Well, also every year our tax collections have increased. We've dedicated a significant percentage of the increase in tax revenues to this construction. And so, yeah, I told you if you like the services you're getting now, then vote for the tax. If not, I mean, I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, people were pretty hot under the collar about transportation. That's why, because we cut transportation. That's where we got the money. So, for better or worse, those were the decisions we made. We do have several permanent classroom wings to show for it. I think, on balance, it was a good decision. I would have preferred to not have to make that decision, but that's not the job that I was given. So, that's the answer.
If there's a question out there, you know, whoever that wants to ask the question, please come up. We more than want you to do that. I'd like to have, or you wanted a question?
Yeah, well, I wasn't looking at emails, I was writing
Well,
notes.
I was gonna do an announcement on you, but go ahead.
Oh, that's fine, yeah, well, since it'll be my turn in the hot seat.
That's right.
In a couple of weeks. I was just jotting some notes down on my phone as you were talking. First of all, congratulations. You know, I heard a lot of wonderful statistics about how well we've improved in Lafayette Parish, and certainly throughout our school system. And it was great to hear that we have a lot of graded schools, A's and B's. My concern are about the D's, the C's, D's, and F's. I understand we have one F, but we didn't talk much about D schools. So how many D schools do we have? Would be, and combined D and F's would be one question I have. The other one was about accountability for teachers today, which leads me again to the question of what happens with, will we ever see in Lafayette Parish a very robust program where we'll do evaluations, and I think you touched on one. I thought was great was when a student comes in and when a student exits, you can tell how well they progressed, and are we using that as a tool to evaluate teachers and how it's implemented, which is important to me because I'm all about process improvement. And has there been any talk about mentoring? And the reason I talk about mentoring is in my business, when we had poor performing divisions or departments, we would plant and put in place mentoring programs to help improve the processes, improve I guess the functions, and then of course, how well performance of the individuals that we needed to. So those are basically it, but I'll just tell you where my concern lies, and it's those underperforming schools that are kind of left out there on their own, so to speak, because teachers don't want to go in underperforming schools, especially those that are tenured. So we're sending teachers who are coming straight from college into an area that they're expected to fix and repair, but they don't know how, because they don't know what they don't know. So that's why I'm wondering, is there a way to take that knowledge that we have from tenured teachers and get it into the more disadvantaged schools to help improve performance of students? And again, thanks.
And I'm not reading emails either, I'm pulling up answers to your question.
Oh,
Are you running for an office with the school board?
well, I'm not so sure.
No, not with the school board, he's not that dumb.
No, but I will say, after I hear some of the questions you have, I may be running, just running out of the building. Here's the tough questions. We just get.
No, absolutely. I was pulling up answers to your question. I don't know the exact number of DNF schools. I believe J.W. Falk is still a D that I mentioned earlier, but it's one of the schools that was A-rated in terms of growth this year. So when the scores come out in the fall, fully expect that to be either a high C or a low B, assuming they keep on their current trajectory. As far as accountability for teachers, this is, I got a lot of grief about a year and a half ago because the state Department of Education gives you a rubric that grades teachers at 4 different levels, I believe. It's highly effective, maybe effective. Do you know the 4, Maggie? Brian?
Highly effective, effective, proficient, effective, emerging, and ineffective.
There we go. All right, so we have 1,900 teachers in classrooms in the parish. I'm going to give you a guess as to how many were rated ineffective. And keep in mind, these are grades assigned by their principals, correct?
Oh, I'm sure probably less than 10% graded ineffective.
Not percent. 3.
Really?
3 teachers in the entire parish were graded as ineffective. And I don't say that to mean that we must have more ineffective teachers. I say that to mean, and this is what I said at the time, was it doesn't matter what profession you go to.
That's right.
You're going to have a certain floor percentage of people who are not suited for that profession. And that's just, like, it happens. I had a job that I wasn't good at. It doesn't mean that I'm a bad person or not smart. It just means that wasn't the job for me. And so you're going to have a certain floor percentage. Now, on the flip side, 97% of the teachers were rated in the top 2 categories. And so this doesn't make sense to me. It's not necessarily, I was educated on this, as I said, it should be a bell curve, but it's not necessarily the case that it's going to be a bell curve. It's going to be shifted up a little bit. So you should expect to have more in the top 2 categories than you have in the bottom two categories, because you're eventually going to weed out the ones who are actually ineffective. But what really bothered me about this was, it turns out, this is the information I got, is that when a teacher is rated as ineffective, or what was the ineffective emerging?
Emerging proficient.
Emerging proficient, which is the second lowest.
No, effective emerging.
Effective emerging, which is the second lowest. It evidently triggers a lot of paperwork for the principal. And so it's a disincentive for the principal to accurately rate teachers. And so what we really have to focus on is not just meaningful evaluation, because I think too often people go into an evaluation of teachers with the idea that it's punitive, which it shouldn't be. I get evaluated every year by my manager, and he gives me feedback that is not easy to hear sometimes, but is always intended to help me become a better employee and to be more effective at my job. And so we need to be able to give evaluations to teachers that allow them to become more effective, to be understanding of those teachers right out of school. That maybe, one of the things I always hear is you can't teach classroom management. You can't teach a teacher right out of school what it's going to be like to have 24 kindergartners in your classroom that have runny noses and untied shoes and all this other stuff, right? That's something that you can only gain through experience. And so to help these teachers become better and learn how to manage those things that they're not able to teach them in school, that's something we have to be good at. And the reason I was pulling up this year's budget for the Lafayette Parish School System, I'm going to find it, it's in here somewhere. All right, so we are adding a Director of Administrative Leadership at the school system. This position is intended to give management style training to our principals, because this is another piece of training that our principals and teachers don't get in the College of Education. They don't really get trained on how to manage people. And this evaluation problem that I'm talking about is fundamentally a management problem and not an education problem. You have to be an education expert in order to evaluate the teacher, but you need to also understand how constructive evaluations happen so that your employees can grow. And that's fundamentally the problem that we're talking about. We are adding a high demand incentive stipend for grades 6 through 12 math, science, and ELA teachers in urgent intervention required schools. So we are encouraging that at a total cost of $168,000. We are actually going to give bonuses to teachers who want to go teach in our underperforming schools. And then 60 mentor stipends at $1,960 a piece. So that means 60 veteran teachers in our school system will be paid an extra $2,000 this year to take new teachers under their wing and give them guidance on how it is in a school. So to answer all three of your points about how do we get these experienced teachers to help the new teachers, how do we get the experienced teachers in the urgent intervention required schools, this is how we're planning to do it. So don't forget about us when you're in Baton Rouge.
Obviously won't. Not now, you guys are doing a great job, so yeah. My other question was gonna be, what do you need from me in Baton Rouge? So we'll talk about that after.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Thank you very much, sir.
My pleasure.
We don't need an additional summation. You're okay with what you said?
I stand by my words.
Okay, fine, good. And would you do me a favor and come up and tell the people here, the friends in them, so they can get to YouTube, and he edits it and does a great job of it.
Well, I'm going to assume everybody's been on the internet, so you go to youtube.com, and the splash page, the first page of YouTube comes up. It'll have a search bar at the top. Put in CCGG space and then the name, Mr. Centanni, and that's the video that would come up. It'll probably be on this kind of Saturday. If you want to hear any other speakers, we have Bruce Cox, for example, comes here a lot. Harold Scheffler comes now and then, or anybody else you know that speaks here. You put in CCGG space and then their name or the date they spoke on, and it'll come up. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. Our next speaker, matter of fact, he's here with us this evening, You heard him talk just a minute ago. Jim Dorey. Jim, thanks for being here this evening.
Sure.
Jim is
Pleasure.
running in House of Representatives. That's Nancy Landra's seat. She's been forced out because of the amount of time that she's already served. So if there's any special statement you want to tell them to make sure and come back?
Sure.
15?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should I go here, there, where you
Well,
want?
whatever you, if you would like to.
No, I'll
come
come up here
so
that way,
to
so
start
you can
recognizing who
I can
you
talk
are.
that way. But, you know, I'm actually coming in here, it's a clean sheet of paper, to be quite honest with you. I've never run for office before. So why I'm coming to these type of events is to do just this, to learn a lot more about what's happening in the community. And no, I'm not a historian, so you can ask me questions about history, and I'm just gonna have to bring my civics book to answer them for you, because I don't remember half the stuff I did in civics class.
Don't feel like the Lone
Just
Ranger.
being honest with you. But my wife's gonna be here with me too. She's always with me when I make events. What I like to talk about when I get back is, you know, just a bit about who I am, so you understand me as a person. I'll talk about what I think's what I believe important to be, we need to focus on in Baton Rouge for our community here in Lafayette, but by and large, what I see in Louisiana in general. You know, and you're right, we have a whole host of problems, and the big problem we have is that, you know, we're probably the best at everything that's the worst. We're not first of anything. Of course, we are first in a couple of things, but they're not good either. So we're going to talk about those that I've identified. But I'm looking forward to it. I really am. So yeah, thanks
Thanks
for
for
the
being here
opportunity.
this evening. We'll see you 2 weeks from tonight.
2 weeks from now. Yeah, on tax day.
Tax day. Come with your money so we
Be a
can
kind.
collect taxes.
I'm sure you'll be a kind crowd on tax day.
I want to thank everyone again for being here. We appreciate it. We're going to do a couple of conversations. They do serve meals if you want to be having a meal at this point. But anyhow, thank you all very much. We appreciate you being here. God bless.